Welcome everyone to Talking with Teachers on Barnstable Educational Television, B2B TV. My name is Jim Gilbert, your station coordinator. I'm here with Martha Swindler, Barnstable High School English teacher. Thank you for joining me, Martha.
Thank you for inviting us, Jim.
My pleasure. We know that sometimes it's hard to get teachers into the television studio, so I greatly appreciate you being here. I like to start with sort of where our kids are. So where did you go to high school?
Well, I actually grew up in Manhattan, and I went to an elementary school that finished in 8th grade, so I had to apply to high school. I didn't go to the public schools in New York City in the 70s. They really weren't as safe as they are now. So I ended up applying to several different schools, and I ended up at the Ethical Culture Schools, the Fieldston School, which is actually outside of Manhattan in the North Bronx. It's in Riverdale, New York. And I joke that part of the reason I chose it was because it had a football team and a swimming pool. I mean, downtown Manhattan doesn't have those things, Jim, so I wanted a traditional high school experience. So that was really wonderful for me. It was a commute, but it was wonderful to be on a campus.
What did you take the train there?
Actually, took a bus for a few years, and then I had a friend who had a house in Connecticut, so he could get his license, and he ended up driving. We ended up,
Commuting.
Thank you, together, with several other students, actually. We were like New Yorkers, 4 of us in the car, and we rotated days, so.
That's fun.
Yeah.
How many students in your graduating class?
My graduating class was 134 students, so small.
About a third to a half of what we do here at Barnstable.
Yeah.
Do you have any memory that sticks out about that time, above and beyond sort of commuting with your friends? And was there an educational moment that you remember?
Yeah, I took a class. We had a teacher who was certified in history and in English, and he taught a double block class that was American history and literature. So you would come in, he was very organized, Mr. Montero, and his board on one side would be history notes and then complementary literature notes next to it. And that really brought history to life for me. Names, dates, those all get mixed up in my head, but when there's a story, I remember it. So he really stuck out as an important person for me.
That's a nice story. We like the teachers who embrace narrative, right?
Absolutely. The other one was a photography teacher.
Oh, okay.
My school had an old-fashioned dark room with a revolving door and all of those things, and that was my non-academic safe haven.
So while we're there in a dark room in photography, and our students here at Barnstable live in such a digital world, talk a little bit about, and I'll jump a few steps here, talk a little bit about being an educator in a digital world as a person with an analog experience.
I have always enjoyed technology, electrical gadgets. I think that might be genetic. My grandfather was a mechanical engineer, and I think, truthfully, I have been taking trainings with our incredible technology department for many, many years, mainly because I felt as though I was killing a lot of trees as an English teacher. When they revise papers over and over, I started to feel as though it wasn't best for the climate. So our technology department helped me. So I have been doing essays through Google Docs for over 10 years, and then started doing the classroom when they offered some training. So the Google Suite has been really friendly for those of us who are analog trained, which is helpful and very easy for the students. I think it's important, though, to remember connection. And I think last year, being so digital and so connected to them, there's a big, huge piece missing, that connection in person. That happens in a discussion in an English class, especially before writing an essay. Being able to bounce ideas off of a peer is so important, and so that has made it, last year it made it difficult, but this year it's wonderful because they're excited to be back and doing non-computerized activities, whether it's an icebreaker or doing an activity with a partner. It's really nice to see the kids be refreshed and not so much on their technology. It's really wonderful.
And that's part of That's part of what they talk about with the need for kids to be in school, right? And the detriment that some of this digital work imparts on them, right? Is that they, not only do they need the connection to you as an educator, but they need the connection to the materials that they're using.
Oh, yeah. And I think it's important to remember that they need to learn how to interact with one another. I go back to the foundation of our country and what a democracy is. And a democracy is really people learning to debate, read, debate, and understand and agree to disagree sometimes and vote the way they want to vote. And I worry that they're losing those skills, those
Right.
oration skills, just being comfortable speaking in front of their peers. And being able to have difficult conversations with their peers.
Right.
So I think that those are skills we're going to have to come back from. But it's a pendulum, so it will swing back, I'm sure. But for right now, I think we can take some of the incredible things we learned, we can keep from last year, and then really go back to the old-fashioned ways as well. I think it'll be nice to have a balance.
That's great stuff. Thank you so much. Back to you a little bit. What happened after high school? Where did you go to college?
I went to Brown University.
Providence, Rhode Island.
Providence, Rhode Island.
Yeah.
I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to work with teenagers. So I floated around, but I ended up taking an education class with a man named Ted Sizer, who's pretty well known. I didn't know it at the time, but pretty well known in terms of seeing education in a new light. And so I did an undergraduate program there, majoring in English literature, and then got my master's at Tufts in secondary education. And I went right to grad school because it was the 90s, it was a recession, so I figured I might as well keep getting those degrees I need while I can't find work.
Right. That makes sense to me. Is that where in that Brown University experience did you know / decide that becoming a teacher was the route that you were going to go?
My education classes were really, they were life-altering. I think for me, realizing the importance of adults in the teenager's life, the importance of the connection, and one of his lessons was you want to make connections so that they'll come along for the ride, even if it's difficult material for them or foreign material for them, that when they've made a connection and feel connected with the adult, they're more likely to do the hard work. So that was something I have taken with me.
And has it worked?
It's worked. It's worked very well for 27 years. Yeah, it's worked very well.
That's great. So, New York City, Providence, Rhode Island, Boston, Massachusetts, all very urban, some different demographics in those things, but definitely city life. How'd you get to the Cape, and why are you staying here?
I got to the Cape because I was offered a job. I applied to about 70 school districts in the early 90s, which was pen and paper in those days.
Yep.
And I did a lot of subbing where I lived in the South End and I would sub in the suburbs. I would become a substitute in the suburbs, and I couldn't find work. And my parents have some friends who are retired here who honestly said, there's worse places to be in the summer. So I came down, and I honestly thought I was going to get some experience and then come back to the Cape. And I made some great friends and made some connections here that have been around for a long time. And I'm amazed to think about watching some of them move up. I mean, Kristen Harmon and I were new teachers together, and she's now our assistant superintendent, which is just so wonderful. And it's great to see that. I also love being in the same school for this many years, to have taught whole families and now children of young people I taught. And being a part of a community for a long period of time has been rewarding in ways I can't even articulate.
You're touching on something that my background was not always on the Cape. I came here from other places as well, and my high school was a small one. We only had 75 people in my graduating class. And Barnstable always sort of comes across as the largest small town ever. Talk a little bit about that, about having 400 kids per class, but that generational connection on that small town feel.
I do. This school is large, and that was something that when I first started here was a bit overwhelming. And what I started to notice was when I teach To Kill a Mockingbird, we talk about how people stereotype based on absolutely nothing, like where you live. So they sit by village, and I was actually something that was created by a woman who retired decades ago named Stephanie LaRoche, and it was a wonderful lesson plan. So we still do it, and that idea that what does it mean to live in Marston's Mills versus Hyannis, and so those things. And you know, we get into those conversations about urban, and then I can tell them what urban really is, and that Hyannis is slightly urban, but not compared to other major cities, and that it does have a city feel sometimes. But what I'm amazed with is that they've all gone to the same group of elementary schools, and then they come together in 4th grade. And when I first came, it was 5th grade. But they all come together at that pivotal age. So many of them have known each other forever. So I walk into a room and I have to learn 25 new names, and they all already know each other. Right. Many of them do. So that feel that they all know each other. It's not like in Manhattan where we all dropped in from all over the city to a high school in 9th grade. These people have known each other. So I think that's where that small town feel comes from. Whether it's they were in, you know, a production of The Wizard of Oz when they were little here at the school, or they were on the same soccer team when they were 5, or, you know, whatever it might be. Right. And I do think that keeps it that small town feel.
There are benefits to both, right? You know, the world can expand for them, but they can also have some community in their villages and know their neighborhoods.
Yeah.
What are you feeling for this year? Or let me ask that differently. What was your goal for the tone of your classroom before COVID, and what is the goal for the tone of your classroom after COVID?
It hasn't changed, Jim. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is something we all need to remember, that at the bottom we need to be fed, and we need to have sleep, and we need to have shelter, and that's what Barnstable did when COVID hit. Those first few weeks, we were making sure everybody was fed and everybody had food and everybody had what they needed. And then as you move up, you know, safety comes next. So if a teacher doesn't create a safe environment, whether it's safe from COVID or safe from bullying or safe to take academic choices, creating a safe environment allows all of those things to take place. And I have always spent, now of course I didn't do this last year because it was digital in the very beginning and it was hard to do, but I've always spent the first 2+ weeks working on the classroom climate. You know, what are my guidelines, how do I grade, but also what are my expectations when you're here? Sorry, Ashley. What are my expectations when you're here? You know, and what do you want out of this room? And so they create, it's not, in you know, younger years, they create a letter that they're all gonna sign that when we're together, we will. We just come up with what does respect look like and sound like? So we're going to listen to one another and face each other when we're working, and just those basics of how to do school. Maybe it's because I've taught freshmen for many years as well, but reviewing how to do school and how to have a conversation and work with someone and be in a classroom with everyone, it's not a bad reminder. And I think this time around it was great because we could have that conversation about personal space as well. That in the old days it was, hey, not everybody wants to be near you for their own personal reasons. Right. And that gets into sometimes difficult conversations. Now it's just everybody needs their space to be healthy. Right. And that's really wonderful in many ways. I just like that we can now sit and face each other in a horseshoe and actually look at one another. That matters to me. I don't want to be in the front of the room. I like to think of the room as being a guide. Here's something to read, and now, you know, I'm guiding them, but I really like when they can take that ownership, which was harder last year when they were partially at home and partially here. You know, that just, when May came, you know, tears in my eyes, Jim, having them all in the same room. You know, and then this year, just having them all looking at each other. And, well, you know, I'm a fan of the athletics here at Barnstable. The volleyball game last week with a fan section, it's just, it's nice to be back to average, ordinary, everyday things. So I think for us as well as for them.
Yeah, it was such a, I mean, as you know, we produce a lot of sports here. And, you know, last year, just being out on the fields, and watching the students be able to compete with each other, have fun with each other, and that energy was so remarkable because it was such a juxtaposition to sort of what was happening in the building.
Yeah.
And now this year, with everybody back in, and most everything happening again, we're still waiting on clubs. I guess my question is, because so much has changed, but like you've been saying, so much has not changed. So let's finish on the students. What are their needs these days? We know that we need to protect them from bullying. We know that we need to protect them from secrets and
COVID and
all. Well, COVID's an obvious one.
Right.
Bullying you don't always see or hear or whatnot. So I remember what it was like to be bullied. I remember what it was like to feel left out.
Oh, maybe even more so. With social media, Jim, I think they're dealing with isolation in different ways than maybe we did too, because it's there all the time.
Right.
So that's a tough one because it's such an ingrained part of their life. I tell them regularly that I think one of the biggest evils is a cell phone because it's such a distraction. You can be a focused person and still be incredibly distracted by your phone. So I have tried to tell them that in this new world, I hope that they've learned there's a time and a place for their phone or their screens, and a time and a place for them not to be there.
Yeah.
And it's why I love seeing, like this week, the football game, they don't have their phones out. They're in the game and they're part of the game. And I mean, if they do, it's taking a selfie or whatever. It's not, I think that piece of being able to go out and do things is essential. And I think they're going to be on their phones less when they're out because they get it now. I don't get to always be out to dinner. I don't get to always go to a football game. I don't get to do these things. And now that it's been taken from me. So I think that is going to be a big piece of it. But I also think in general as teachers, we need to teach them how to cope with a phone.
Right.
The same way we need to teach them any skill, they need to learn the skill that if you have it, there's a time and a place for it and a reason for it and how to be polite, how to be respectful even with the technology.
Sure.
And I do think that, it's a safety thing. It is a safety thing that I joke that sometimes it's a parent that upsets them that texting, or it's a significant other, or it's a friend. But as you said, it's now constant. They can't escape to my English class for 50 minutes and 60 minutes and be there. It's always there. So that's one of the things I love to do too, is everybody put away your phones. We're gonna old fashioned. Mrs. Swindler's gonna read out loud. What a concept, right? And they love it. In the old days, they used to get tired and fall asleep. Well, you should have seen them this week, all with their faces like,
oh, nice.
They just enjoyed that, hearing a story.
Do you make them read out loud sometimes?
I do, but only if they're comfortable reading out loud.
Right.
So it's one of those, if the kids aren't comfortable, they can pass.
Yeah.
But yeah, and there are the kids who love to chit-chat like I always did. So they love to read out loud, Jim. So they love to read out loud for me, but yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Jim.
I really appreciate it. Let's pretend for a minute that there's a whole bunch of parents watching. Is there anything you think parents should know about what happens inside Barnstable High School?
Well, the first thing I think you should know is that many of the teachers in this building are also parents in this building. So for me, my daughter graduated and is now a sophomore at Wheaton, and my son is a sophomore here at the school. So I think it's important for parents to know that we treat your children like they're our children. So we hold them to standards and we have expectations the same way we would. And I think they should know that safety is paramount in a building this big. It always has been. And I also think it's important to know that this place offers so many incredible academic courses and courses in the arts and, cooking and our career pathways. I mean, just what's offered is just profound. I mean, it's amazing what's offered here. I really do think so. And when clubs come back, because I'm hoping that as well, I do think that we offer extracurriculars that are, above and beyond. Support groups like the Gay Straight Alliance and the Stand Up to Stand Out against racism, but also art club and drama club and, hip hop club. Like the fact that those are offered and student incentives, like that the students pushed for them,
Yep.
is so very important, that they're getting what they want to have, which is wonderful. So I think that you should know the teachers here take care of your kids like they're their own and take advantage of everything this place has to offer.
Thank you so much for all your wonderful answers, Martha. I
You're
greatly
welcome.
appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim.
This has been Talking with Teachers, a new program on Barnstable Educational Television, B2B TV. Thanks for watching.